proxy race.
Watching the results of the latest air attacks against the Iraqis. We're watching bad weather moving in over Iraq and Kuwait, which could diminish some of the air attacks over the next 48-hour period. And of course, we'll continue to monitor the movement of U.S. ground forces near the Kuwaiti border. Our CBS News coverage of war in the Gulf continues.
CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here's Charles Osgood and Susan Spencer.
It is 2 a.m. Eastern Time. It is about 10 a.m. in the Persian Gulf. Here are the latest headlines from our Gulf War coverage. Israel's Prime Minister convenes his cabinet to discuss retaliation for Iraqi missile attack. Israel's Military Chief of Staff says that Israel is obliged to retaliate. Some retaliation happening right now by Allied warplanes. The cabinet meets as Israel assesses the damage from the nighttime Iraqi attack. There were 8 confirmed hits by Scud missiles in Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities. There was damage, no question about that, but there was no loss of life, and there were about a dozen minor injuries. Correspondent Bill McLaughlin reports the cabinet appears to be leaning toward waiting for now to see the results of the new Allied air attacks. Baghdad appears calm this morning, nothing like the scene during the opening night of air attacks. Israeli gunners tried to fight off the waves of attacking Allied warplanes. The cameraman who took these stunning pictures gave his impressions.
But certainly the battle did light up the skies. The Iraqi ground defense systems, I think, were actually more pretty than effective. It's the first time I've seen a cruise missile land. It does light up the entire night sky, turn it into daylight. But as I say, the Iraqi defense systems were more pretty than effective.
So each 15 minutes we're trying to catch you up by giving you the headlines. We realize that you're probably not going to be able to stay with this coverage all night long. Some of you, I suppose, will. But every 15 minutes, anyway, we'll try to catch you up on the latest developments. Susan?
Charlie, Scott Pelley, CBS correspondent Scott Pelley is standing by in Bahrain with the latest from there. Scott, what have you learned there recently?
Good morning, Susan. While the word apparently waits for Israel's reply to the overnight Scud missile attacks here in Bahrain in eastern Saudi Arabia, Saddam Hussein is receiving the reply of the United States and the Allied air forces here. All morning long, we have watched jet fighters and attack planes like European Tornadoes taking off from this airbase, heading north, apparently into Kuwait and Iraq. These aircraft have been leaving here in numerous sorties over the last several hours, almost continuously, apparently delivering a punishing blow in response to the Scud missile attacks. Early this morning, before dawn, there was a Scud missile attack on this location. It was photographed by a cameraman on top of a building near the airbase where we are here in eastern Saudi Arabia. Let's have a look at that videotape. On the tape, you will see an orange streak. That, we are told this morning by the Pentagon, is an American Patriot missile. The Patriot missile is capable of catching up with an incoming Scud warhead and destroying it. As we were standing here this morning, we heard the Patriot missile take off from the airbase, and only a couple of seconds later there was a loud explosion, and we could feel the concussion here as the Scud missile was apparently destroyed. Only one incoming Scud missile launched in this direction, it seems, at this hour. That one missile destroyed by American anti-aircraft. On the border today, we are given to understand that Allied troops are massing on the border with Kuwait. Late yesterday, just before sunset, we saw several hundred U.S. and British tanks, armored personnel carriers, and artillery pieces massing on the border and moving north. None of that equipment had crossed the border into Kuwait at the time that we saw them, but clearly it was the beginning of a major armored drive, apparently getting set for making the last preparations before a ground assault into Kuwait. Also this morning, we are told that United States Marines have engaged in skirmishes with Iraqi troops. Apparently, Marine helicopters have crossed the border into Kuwait and taken out several Iraqi missile batteries. A few U.S. Marines have been injured by Iraqi artillery, although we are told at this hour those injuries are slight. It seems that the ground war is beginning. Susan?
About the Patriot missiles that you mentioned, is there any sense among the U.S. officials there that that defense system should have been more effective against the attack against Israel?
Susan, to be frank, I do not know just how many Patriot missile batteries there may have been in and around Tel Aviv. I understand the Israelis have purchased the Patriot system in some quantity from the United States. I will tell you, after having been here for several months, there are Patriot missile systems all over the eastern province of Saudi Arabia protecting sensitive targets such as oil fields, oil refineries, and air bases like this one. And certainly the proof was in the pudding, if you will, last night, as that missile was incoming to our position here and was suddenly, unexpectedly, taken out automatically, I should add, by the Patriot system.
Scott Kelly, this is pictures of what you've just told us about the missile coming in. I suspect that was a fairly unnerving experience.
Well, it happened quite quickly, as you might imagine, Susan. There was an air raid. We were told that we were in immediate danger of incoming missiles. And then before we knew it, we heard the roar of the Patriot missile taking off from the air base. And then a second and a half later, bang, and a concussion as the incoming Iraqi missile was apparently destroyed in midair. It was destroyed about 2 miles from our location, we are told, but you could still feel the concussion of the explosion right here. It was over in no time at all.
Scott, this is Charlie Osgood. From what you say, it sounds as if the ground battle might be about to be joined. Does that mean that it's the assessment of the military commanders over there that the air phase has sufficiently softened up the Iraqi ground forces there in Kuwait?
Probably not at this point, Charlie. We have not seen the massive, overwhelming armor spearhead into Kuwait yet. We have seen preparations for that, long convoys of ammunition trucks and fuel trucks moving into the area where we saw all of this armor yesterday, massing still on the Saudi side of the border. What we have seen so far are small skirmishes, I should call them, I think. U.S. Marines were shelled by Iraqi artillery near the town of Khafji, which is a border town between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. As I said before, the injuries from that shelling were very minor. Also, some small tactical missiles were apparently fired by the Iraqis into Marine locations. The Marines took attack helicopters at that point, came across the border, and shot down, destroyed those missile locations on the Kuwaiti side. But so far, this has not been a wholesale battle. This has been very much quid pro quo.
Thank you, Scott. Scott Pelley reporting to us from Saudi Arabia. We're going to check in now with Barry Peterson at our CBS News Bureau in London. Good morning, Barry. What's your assessment from there?
Charles, well, we're seeing some economic reaction to the attack on Israel. It happened while the Tokyo market was still trading. That market had been up, similar to what happened in New York with the New York Stock Exchange yesterday. A lot of euphoria about how the war was going. After the Israeli attack, a sharp drop, but then when there was no immediate Israeli retaliation, the market climbed back again and managed to regain much of what it had lost. Now, the same is true with the dollar and with oil prices. A lot of volatility during that attack, but some settling down once it became apparent that this war was not going to spread. Now, there's been, of course, reaction on the European continent to the attack. The French have issued a statement condemning the Iraqis for the attack. Britain's Prime Minister John Major said in a written statement he was appalled. He called it unprovoked and unforgivable. Now, it's 7 o'clock in the morning here in London. In about 2 hours, the Prime Minister will meet with his war cabinet on the situation there. Last night, Great Britain time, he addressed his nation, talking about the Persian Gulf conflict and his nation's role in it.
Tonight, I want to explain to you why they are there and what this conflict is about. Our troops are part of an international force. It is drawn from many countries. It is acting under the authority of the United Nations, and its purpose is to end Saddam Hussein's ruthless occupation of Kuwait.
Lest we forget, keep in mind that there are Europeans in the battle there, and Europeans are taking their losses. The Italians yesterday, the Italian parliament agreed to let its troops get into this fight. Today, a report that one of the 10 Italian Tornado jets, a two-man fighter bomber, is now missing. The British also report the loss of a second two-man Tornado. Now, the first one was lost during the daylight raids yesterday, and apparently, according to reports here, the transponder on that plane went on, so there is hope, belief, that the crew of that one got out alive, and we're told that there's a massive rescue effort now to try to get those men to rescue them from behind the enemy lines. Charles?
Barry, it seems from what you say as if the markets in Europe, and for that matter elsewhere in the world, seem to have overlooked everything else, all of the other considerations that they normally look at in deciding where the market is going to go, whether it's going to go up or down, and are looking only at these developments in the Persian Gulf. And it seems that with each development, the missile attack on Israel for one, or any other thing that seems to happen, it becomes the determining factor in which way the markets are going to go, and also the price of oil.
I think it's very much the case, Charles. I think the markets are very much like Americans at this particular moment. The eyes are glued, as one trader said, we're all watching TV sets to see what's going on. And I think the markets are reflecting this kind of instant flow of emotion and of fear sometimes as these developments take place. And I would sort of say, I guess it's pretty self-evident that we can expect this to be the case in these days and weeks ahead.
Perhaps on that score, Barry, there was a feeling in the United States, and I think this was shared by people from coast to coast, when the news of the great success of the initial airstrikes came in, it seemed almost too good to be true, and there was a sort of euphoric reaction. People maybe were a little too pleased with the results, thinking that, well, this means this is going to be very short business. And the Pentagon and the White House yesterday seemed to try to encourage the news media not to encourage euphoria, because after all, this was only the beginning, and we might be entering another and rather more costly phase, costly in terms of human life, among other things. Has there been euphoria in Britain and in Europe as well, and are there efforts to sort of temper it over there?
I think there was some euphoria in the sense that it went so well on the first day, but I think the Europeans were a bit more cautious at the outset. Certainly nothing like what was seen at the New York Stock Exchange with those dramatic increases and, in fact, the cheering on the floor of the stock exchange before trading even started. The Europeans are taking a somewhat more cautious view, and you have to remember, of course, here in Great Britain, they've had more recent experience with the war in the Falklands, and they have a good sense that things aren't going to go perhaps as well as you would like them to go, and sometimes they aren't always what they seem to be. So I think there's a good deal more, let's say, a more realistic sense here that it could go well or it could go badly, but at the moment no one knows for sure, so they're just kind of biding their time.
Thank you, Barry. Barry Peterson speaking to us from the CBS News Bureau in London.
And CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm will continue.
When I think of everything I put in my hair to make it shiny, more manageable, and all it took was a touch of VO5. Yeah, VO5.
VO5 hairdressing. A touch does so much.
Wow, I just tried VO5 for the first time. Yeah, the stuff in the tube your old man used for control. The stuff that's been around forever. Now I know why.
VO5 hairdressing. A touch does so much.
Come on along, I'll take you to the lullaby of Broadway. The hickory and ballyhoo.
The lullaby of Broadway.
And in the center of it all
is the Milford Plaza.
Stay at at the Milford Plaza Hotel with cocktail dinner and breakfast for $49.50 per person. Discover why we are the lullaby of Broadway.
The Milford Plaza is the lullaby of all Broadway.
Cleaning toilets is a lousy job, so I invented 2000 Flushes Blue to help you. It's loaded with detergents, cleans and deodorizes automatically, up to 4 months. Try my 2000 Flushes Blue or green. Cleans your toilet with every flush.
I'll never get through tomorrow if I don't get some Z's.
Introducing single-dose maximum strength Nitol. Just one will help you fall fast asleep fast. New maximum strength Nitol. Just one Nitol will help you get a lot of Z's.
When life's little irritations are everywhere you turn, more people turn to Visine. When eyes need it most, it's the most trusted name for relief. Visine gets the red out and a whole lot more.
Why do I enjoy healthier Alpine Lace, low cholesterol and low sodium Swiss low cheese? Because it tastes so good. And now it's even lower in fat.
The healthy and tasty Swiss low cheese tastes so good from Alpine Lace.
Here are the headlines at this hour. The Israeli cabinet meets to consider striking back against Iraq. The U.S.-led allied forces pound Iraqi targets. Iraq fires 8 conventionally armed Scud missiles into Israeli territory. One aimed for Dhahran in Saudi Arabia is shot down. A second U.S. airplane lost in combat. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir is calling an emergency meeting of his cabinet following the Iraqi Scud missile attack, as Israel presumably is considering retaliation, something U.S. officials definitely don't want, fearing harm to the allied coalition should that come. At least 10 people were injured when one of 8 Iraqi-fired Scud missiles ripped into a residential area of Tel Aviv. Shortly after the attack, the mayor of Tel Aviv toured the damaged areas.
My feeling is, look, I mean, war is not a summer camp, and to my sorrow, people were wounded. We are taking care of the families, of the babies, of the children. I went to, because the people are now they were concentrated in 2 shelters, in a school and in another place. I went to calm them down, to speak with them, to tell them that we will take care of them. We'll evacuate them from here, we'll give them housing, and we will continue to live and to enjoy life.
The first pictures of last night's U.S.-led air assault on Baghdad have now been made available. Another wave of attacks is underway again right now. A second U.S. warplane is reported lost, although details are sketchy, and the military has released the name of the first U.S. casualty, F-18 pilot Lieutenant Commander Michael S. Spiker, 33 years old, assigned to the USS Saratoga. With us now from Washington is Dr. Rona Fields, a psychologist and author who has spent 20 years researching and examining members of terrorist groups worldwide. Dr. Fields, you may hold the answer to the question I guess everybody has right now. What do you think is going on in the mind of Saddam Hussein?
Well, I think that the mind of Saddam Hussein is a very intelligent and effective, self-confident mind, if you want to call it that, and that he has quite thoroughly considered all of his alternatives, and primary amongst them the political points he's attempting to make. And of course his terror attack on Israel is his primary political point at this stage of the operation.
Do you think that he will consider now the point made, that we could look back and see this at a critical juncture where things begin to turn around as far as his determination to stick this out?
I think this is the beginning of a series of points. If we study the process of war in the Middle East, and particularly the process of hostilities as conducted by Saddam Hussein, it's a hostage process. The object is to maintain control of the majority of the population of the antagonist group as well as his own, and the most effective and historic way to do this is to keep people hostage to his next operation.
But this continuing pounding of Baghdad, really, you don't think is going to have an impact? I mean, he is going to continue exactly in the mode he has been, with all the rhetoric and all the threats, as if nothing were happening?
Well, it's not as if nothing were happening. It's his use of what's happening to support his projected image of himself.
But can his image not help but become that of a defeated leader?
No, his image is becoming that of a martyred victim, a hero. And that's exactly the kind of image a person needs to have of himself to maintain a kind of self-righteous indignation that characterizes the member of a terrorist or paramilitary organization. And this is exactly the mindset that he's established for compatriots as well as for himself. This is what he's communicating.
Are those compatriots going to stick with him, though? You know, at this point, it's only a day and a half into this. Do you see terrorist operations realizing that militarily, or it appears that militarily, the end for him is not all that far off? Do you think that his co-terrorists will stick with him?
Yes. In fact, I think he can gain steam as this proceeds. You see, he's operating from a culture and from a predicament that already views itself as vulnerable, threatened victims and prospective victims. He's communicating this identification not only to others in Iraq, but certainly in the larger Arab community. And as Iraq takes the pounding, the verification is forthcoming. You see, and particularly as the pounding proceeds on what might be perceived as civilian targets, his message is validated.
So pounding of Israel will only enhance his image, you feel?
Unfortunately, yes.
So as far as the U.S. is concerned, then, from a psychological standpoint, there's no way to win this.
Well, I think from a psychological standpoint, there are a lot of alternatives in a democracy that don't exist in large parts of the world in which a person's repertoire is limited, both by violence and dictatorship.
Thank you very much. You've answered some of the questions I think trouble everybody about just who this person is.
Thank you, Dr. Fields. CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm will continue.
Throughout the country today, eyes have been riveted on television sets, on newspapers, trying to figure out every moment what's going on, what the situation is. Bruce Morton has a report on America watching this war.
Dawn in Washington on the first full day of war. Across from the White House, one protester holds a candle.
I'm just so sad, but hopefully next time we'll learn how to do it a new way.
And the battle began. For these men and women in Miami, all with relatives serving in the Gulf, the longest day started last night. They watched the president, some cried, and then they prayed together.
Hallowed be thy name.
In Indianapolis, they raised the flag. They do it every day, but this was different. All around the country, even the men who print the newspapers couldn't wait to read all about it. The longest day dawned in San Francisco. Hard to believe how the world had changed during the night.
It's surreal in a way for us to be standing on the street corner and be at peace and quiet and a beautiful morning and to think of what's going on halfway around the world.
This is very scary, very real, and it's hard to understand and comprehend the danger of it all.
For Farrell Klein in Garland, Texas, this was Christmas morning. He saw his pilot son on television coming back from a mission.
Oh, that was good. I mean, just like having a ringside seat. And gosh, I was really rooting for him. And I said, go get him, Donnie.
Jesse, what do you think about war?
None of those Iraqis, if they win, that they'll come and bomb the United States.
In Crete, Nebraska, they talked about the war in the town's one-room schoolhouse and wrote letters to the troops.
If it was up to me and I was a general, I'd send my dad back.
The kids in this counseling session at Burbank Elementary in Hampton, Virginia, are a little closer to the war. Their fathers are all in the service, all in the Gulf.
What about real life do you really care about, Matthew?
My father.
Your father?
I know my father's not going to get killed.
Some Americans protested the war. In Boston, they seemed to remember all the slogans from Vietnam protests a generation ago. In Denver, pro and anti-war groups clashed.
What if my sons died? You know what I would feel? That these peace protesters to me killed my sons.
Some protested, many prayed. St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C.
We ask God to protect those who fight in our behalf, and with a true peace achieved, to bring them back to us sound in body and heart and mind.
And I hope that everybody can pull together and let them know that we're behind them.
They're doing their part, and this is the only part we can do, is to pray for them.
I will do it every day, on my knees.
We prayed, some of us, and protested, some of us, and worried, many of us, especially those kids in Norfolk whose dads are far from home.
I feel sad. I feel sad too.
We prayed, we protested, we worried. Most of us, this first and longest day, just held our breaths and hoped. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
Among the fears many Americans have is that the war will be brought home in the form of terrorism. There is the possibility of terrorism anywhere, of course, but airports are particularly sensitive. Airline flights are. We're going now to Harvey Levin, reporter for KCBS TV in Los Angeles, who is at the Los Angeles International Airport. Harvey?
Charlie, just a few minutes ago, the LAPD bomb squad was called out to the United Airlines terminal to investigate an abandoned package that was left unattended curbside. The area was cordoned off. However, it has not interrupted flights. Now, there have been a couple of other big scares here today. At about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Southwest Airlines Flight 871 from Los Angeles to Phoenix was delayed because a telephone bomb threat targeted that flight. Now, 2 people were arrested at the airport. They were questioned and then released. The plane was searched. No bomb was found, and it took off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon without incident. And at about that very time that the plane was taking off, there was another big scare in the international terminal, which is where we are right now. Right behind me in the corner, the police found an abandoned suitcase without any identification tags, and the suitcase was locked. They called the bomb squad. The suitcase was hoisted in the air, and the bomb squad x-rayed the bag. They developed the x-rays at the airport, found that there was no bomb inside. They opened it up, and fortunately, there were only a few blankets inside of the suitcase. The security here is obviously heightened because of the war in the Middle East. The security here is very tight, and no curbside check-in, of course. The police presence is felt everywhere you walk, particularly in the international terminal. No one without a ticket can go beyond the security checkpoints. And I think an interesting footnote, I went to the travel insurance counter a couple of hours ago and asked if it was more difficult to get travel insurance, flight insurance, because of the war. I was told that there was no such trouble, but this is a great case of reading the fine print. The reason there is no such trouble is because travel insurance does not cover terrorism or acts of war. Reporting live from Los Angeles, I'm Harvey Levin. Charlie and Susan, back to you.
Are they making special announcements about being sure that you don't leave your bags unattended? Because this is something, obviously, that creates a situation like the one that you just told us about.
Indeed they are, and once you check in, when you get to your gate, the attendant there often asks, it sounds like a third degree actually, they ask where your bags were since you walked into the airport, if you left them for any period of time. So they're trying to be as careful as they can, and people are more than happy to cooperate.
Thank you, Harvey. Harvey Levin reporting to us from the Los Angeles International Airport.
Expect it to take a long time. CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues in just a moment.
Watching CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here's Charles Osgood and Susan Spencer.
And here are the top headlines in our continuing coverage. Allied armor is moving towards Kuwait. The Israeli cabinet is meeting to consider retaliation for a missile attack. Iraqi missiles strike Israel, causing some damage and injuries. The United States pounds Iraqi missile launchers. CBS News correspondent Scott Pelley reports from Saudi Arabia that hundreds of Allied armored units are on the move north towards Kuwait, possibly signaling a ground attack against the Iraqi invaders. At the same time, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir has called his cabinet into session to decide whether to retaliate after an Iraqi missile attack. At least 8 Scud missiles hit Tel Aviv, Haifa, and other areas on Israel's Mediterranean coast. The missiles were armed with conventional warheads, not with chemical weapons, as was feared. The explosions caused extensive damage and at least 10 injuries, but nobody was killed. Afterwards, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations responded.
About 8 to 10 Scud missiles were launched from Iraq against Israel. Some of them hit the areas of Tel Aviv and Haifa. It just shows what kind of risk Israel took upon itself when it refrained from preemptive strike.
This was Baghdad this morning, an eerie picture of one of the world's oldest cities. But this is how it looked on Wednesday night, and right now Allied air attacks continue. Some of the destruction visited on Iraq by American forces was designed to knock out the missile launchers that had fired the Scuds into Israel. Meanwhile, a second American warplane has been reported downed in the continuing Gulf Air War. Those are the headlines of things that are going on. Each 15 minutes we'll be giving you headlines so as to keep you informed on a current basis, update you as to these events in the Persian Gulf and related events around the world.
And Scott Pelley in Bahrain is helping us with that as well. Scott, you told us the last time, just a few minutes ago, in fact, that we spoke, that there was massive troop movements crossing over into Iraq. Is there anything further that you found out about that?
Susan, yesterday we took a trip of about 300 miles up and down the border between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And what we saw during that time was an impressive assembly of U.S. and Allied armor and logistics, long convoys of trucks heading up and down the border, carrying ammunition and fuel to the armored columns that are assembling there. One of the things that we saw yesterday was a field, if you will, of desert, a broad plain of desert that was dotted with American M1 tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles and artillery pieces. They went on as far as the eye could see, all the way to the horizon. Clearly, a major armored thrust was being assembled there, and final preparations were being finished. Final preparations were being put together there for a major armored assault into Kuwait. We have no indication at this point that any such assault has begun, but surely the ground war cannot be kept out of this fight much longer. We were told earlier today that there have been border skirmishes between Iraqi forces and U.S. Marines. The Iraqis have been shelling some parts of northern Saudi Arabia. A small oil refinery was hit by shells. A small desalination plant, a plant used to make fresh water from seawater, was also hit by enemy shells. Some U.S. Marines were injured, although we are told very slightly. Susan?
Scott, one thing that's been troubling me, and maybe you can shed some light on this, and a lot of your answer is just going to be instinctive, but you know, we heard a lot before this all started about the Pentagon's manipulation, if you will, of the press, the imposed censorship, the fact that you can only go out with an escort, with authorized pools and so forth. Do you feel like the information that you're getting is A, timely, and B, really accurate?
I don't doubt its accuracy at this point, Susan. However, I'm not sure how timely it is. The way this war is being covered just at the moment is through what are called combat pools. In the background here, you hear what is undoubtedly an American cargo plane taking off. Yes, it is. It's a C-5 Galaxy cargo plane of the type that has been bringing equipment and men and supplies to this area over the last several months. This airbase is still very, very busy, although over the last few hours what we have seen more than cargo planes, of course, have been combat aircraft heading to Kuwait and Iraq. But as I was saying just a moment ago, there are several combat pools in which American and foreign journalists have been assembled by the Pentagon, and the military is taking those pools to areas where there is fighting. We get videotape and information back from those pools periodically. Naturally, it does not come back as quickly as we would like, although it does seem to be working fairly well. We are moving into a situation here on the ground that is very much more like a war and very hard for the Pentagon to contain. Therefore, many reporters are beginning to look around for themselves to operate outside these combat pools. That's what happened yesterday when a group from CBS took this 200-mile trek up and down the border and saw for the first time how these large armored columns were being assembled for the final assault.
So in fact,
Susan?
with some creativity, you are able to go ahead and gather information independent from that supplied strictly through the Defense Department.
We can, but we must be careful. In going out on our own, we do risk arrest by the Saudi officials who do not like reporters traveling about within their society without a minder, if you will, without a person from the government who can tell you where to go and who you can see. But as this situation becomes more and more fluid, I think we will be seeing more and more enterprise among the reporters.
Let's go back for a second to the either imminent or long-awaited or distant ground war, whatever it turns out to be. What other signs are you getting from the base where you are that could be coming sooner rather than later?
What you see on the roadway here, Susan, all over northern Saudi Arabia are convoys of military vehicles carrying food, carrying ammunition, carrying fuel. These convoys are often miles long, and there isn't very much space in between them. It is a constant flow of equipment and supplies and men into these areas. We have the sense from that final preparations are being made. Armored columns are being massed in particular areas, and supplies being brought to them, particularly critical fuel supplies are being brought to them so that they will have what they need for the final push.
Once the troops are in place, do you have any notion or any sense at all from anybody you've talked with there how long it is practical to leave that huge quantity of men and supplies in place before going ahead to move?
Well, of course, Susan, as you know, some of these soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors, have been in this theater since August without having almost no chance at all for leave. Some have been in the desert, particularly the Marines have been in the desert for that period of time with very little chance of R&R. So one imagines that another week, another 2 weeks, another 3 weeks will make not a great deal of difference to their readiness.
Scott Pelley and Lorraine, we'll be back to you shortly. Thank you very much. Charlie?
I have one development here this morning, Susan. Amman Radio is reporting that the Jordanian government has decided to open its border to refugees from Iraq. There are about 20,000 people reportedly who've been waiting at the border to get in, and Jordan has decided apparently to let them in, although it does have a problem as to how to accommodate them and what to do with them. International refugee organizations are now meeting, perhaps to work out the details of exactly how this is to be done. Susan?
Stephen Spiegel, an expert on the Middle East from the University of California in Los Angeles, is with us now. Sir, can you shed some light on where we stand at the moment from your perspective? We learn that the ground war is perhaps imminent, perhaps not. We know what the bombing has done. Where, in your mind, does this leave Iraq at this juncture?
I think that Iraq is in a position that it is basically losing the war. The attacks against Israel and Saudi Arabia several hours ago were basically acts of desperation. I don't think that's the way Saddam Hussein sees it. I think he thinks that even in defeat, he will be an Arab hero.
Do you think that Israel is now meeting, as we know, to consider whether or not it will, after all, retaliate? What do you think the odds are that the Israelis, if there is no further attack on Israel itself, what are the odds that the Israelis will, in fact, not go ahead with something on their own?
I really think, Susan, it's very close. It's probably kind of a 50-50 situation. It's a fateful decision for Israel, and it's really unprecedented. Ordinarily, Israel would retaliate. However, since there were no severe casualties, and since the United States for the first time is actually involved in combat in the Middle East, there is great reason, in order to protect American-Israeli relations, not to retaliate. And of course, as the cabinet meets, the Israelis may be getting information on how successful the American retaliation is. So the Israelis, what may actually stem the tide for the Israelis and lead them to wait perhaps a day or so more, is that they can always retaliate later. But it's very close. I would suspect that the arguments in the cabinet are very severe.
Professor Spiegel, Charles Osgood here. We seem to be going from one phase to another on the ground in the Persian Gulf area there, from the initial airstrike phase to perhaps to a ground phase, and also politically with the possible involvement of Israel, the Israeli cabinet trying to decide whether or not to retaliate. Does it seem to you that this is a particularly dangerous time, that now Saddam Hussein may feel as if he must make some particular move, and if he doesn't play whatever cards he has now, he might not have a chance to play them at any time in the future?
I think you're right. I think this is a critical moment in the war. The phases were anticipated to go much longer. I think that as a consequence of the success of the airstrikes, there may be some consideration, according to the reports that we've just heard, to use ground forces earlier than might originally have been anticipated, to try to score a knockout blow, regain Kuwait, and possibly end the war. The problem that we face is what other rabbits that Saddam Hussein may pull out. And that question, that fear for the Israeli government of another night of terror, as they just experienced, would be the only reason I can see for retaliating now.
Can you think of any other rabbits that he might be able to pull out of his hat? I mean, if his attempt to get Israel involved was his grand scheme to try to attack the coalition, break it up, can you imagine what other rabbits there might be?
Well, the major rabbit that I can conceive of would be missiles with chemical weapons. Neither Israeli or American intelligence, to the best of our knowledge, knows whether or not he's ever been able to marry chemical weapons to his missiles. Now, the fact that he used conventional weapons tonight suggests that he has not been able to do so. But that would be the major rabbit left, I would think.
Sir, this is Susan Spencer again. Can you foresee a solution to this problem, given what Saddam Hussein has now done vis-a-vis Israel? Can you foresee an eventual solution in which he plays any role at all?
Any role in the Arab-Israeli problem, or in
any role? Well, you know, that he is still the leader of Iraq.
Actually, I can. Most of my colleagues don't. But it seems to me that if we can't achieve our objectives, namely the destruction of his chemical, conventional, nuclear, long-range missile capabilities, and also the resurrection of Kuwait. Now, every indication is that we will not go in to Iraq, and if we don't, then it is conceivable that Saddam Hussein would portray himself as a great hero because he sent these missiles into Israel and he stood up to the United States and remain in power. Unless we are able to produce, or the Iraqi people themselves are able to produce an uprising, and there's no indication of that, it is not totally inconceivable that he could be a defeated dictator, but a dictator nonetheless. Don't forget, in 1967, Nasser was defeated by Israel, resigned, the so-called masses asked for his continuation in power, and he was in power until his death in 1970.
So it sounds, sir, as if what you're saying is if it should be an important objective to make sure that Saddam Hussein is not on the scene when all of this is over.
It is an important objective, but I'm not quite sure how you achieve that. I don't think we can do it from the air. I don't think we have the intention of moving in on the ground or even with commandos and the like, and therefore our major means has to be to try to destroy his credibility with the Iraqi people, and particularly with the elite around him, so that somebody takes him out. I don't think that we'll be able to do it. I think that one of his associates that he's always so suspicious of will have to. But it is not inconceivable, I repeat, that he would remain in power, even defeated.
Thank you, sir. Stephen Spiegel, UCLA political science professor, speaking to us from Los Angeles.
And we are continuing now with our coverage. Here are the headlines in day 2 of the Persian Gulf War. The Israeli cabinet meets to consider retaliation for the Iraqi missile attack. U.S. Air Forces are striking back for that attack as the air assault continues. In Saudi Arabia, hundreds of U.S. military vehicles moved north to the Kuwaiti border. Some U.S. Marines reportedly have been wounded by Iraqi artillery fire. The Israeli chief of staff says Israel is, quote, obligated to respond now that Iraq has fired Scud missiles at Israel. A reported 5 buildings were destroyed in Tel Aviv. Some 80 families left homeless in the surprise missile attack, but injuries are minor and no deaths are reported. Iraq trained one of those Scuds to hit U.S. forces in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, but the Scud was shot down by a surface-to-air Patriot missile. The Iraqi capital of Baghdad appears quiet in pictures from this morning, but the U.S.-led Allied bombing attacks are continuing on sites around Iraq and in Kuwait. That's quite in contrast to the pictures from Wednesday night in Baghdad when the air raid began. And as you see there,
was terrifying.
A lot of firepower evident. As we know, the United States has confirmed 1 fatality thus far in Operation Desert Storm. Lieutenant Commander Michael Spiker, the first U.S. casualty of the Persian Gulf War, shot down in his F-18 jet yesterday. He is, however, officially listed. I guess I should correct myself. He is officially listed as missing in action. Charles?
CBS News' continuous coverage of Operation Desert Storm will continue.
Flu outbreak in 29 states. Coughing, congestion, body aches, fever, headache. And it's spreading fast. What can you do? Doctors recommend Theraflu. Theraflu is hot liquid medicine. Strong therapy for flu symptoms. Hot liquid therapy that works fast. What can you do when you get the flu? Doctors recommend Theraflu. Strong therapy for flu symptoms.
How much insulation do you have in your attic? 3 inches? 6 inches? Well, the Department of Energy recommends R38 for most American homes, which is equivalent to a foot of Owens Corning pink fiberglass. So grab a ruler and measure your attic insulation. Then get rolling, because 12 inches of pink fiberglass can help you get a foothold on your energy bills.
Whoever said life begins at 40 obviously hasn't turned 50 yet. We want to extend these good years, so we've made some changes. The right foods, a little exercise, and because our nutritional needs have changed, we've changed our multivitamin tablet. We take Geritol Extend with all the vitamins we need. It's made for folks over 50. Geritol Extend, because you're as young as you feel.
When you rinse first with Plax, normal everyday brushing takes on a whole new meaning. Plax, clinically proven to remove more plaque than brushing alone.
When this was Grandfather's desk, every week Grandma'd polish it with Pledge for a beautiful shine with no buildup. Now that it's mine, I use Touchable Pledge.
With Pledge, smears just disappear.
Grandma's gonna love it.
Also in a trigger spray bottle.
We continue with our coverage, CBS News continuous coverage of Operation Desert Storm. Susan Spencer and I, Charles Osgood, here with our colleague Bob Fall. Bob, we know that the war has been in many ways brought home to us, although the fact is that the military action is going on over there. But obviously everybody's concerned from coast to coast here.
You know what's changing, Charlie? It's an uncommonly late or early hour, depending on where you are. But even at this hour, you see signs that something has started to change in terms of the public mood. There was a piece the other day in the New York Times that Anna Quinlan did that many Americans regard this man Saddam as pond scum, to use her words. But if you ask them, do you want your kids involved? Do you want them sacrificed? Many would say no. Well, what we see now is that attitude is starting to harden up. And one reason, at least it appears one reason, is the attacks on Tel Aviv. Is bringing about already a change in the American sentiment. All across the country, though, in schools and their living rooms, Americans are trying to come to terms with new and the dreadful reality of being at war. Frank Courier now reports on how the people in one town were coping today.
In small towns all across the land, the American flag is flying as if it were the 4th of July. Here in tiny Friend, Nebraska, many who yesterday were afraid of getting into battle are now somehow relieved it has started. At a country crossroads on a frosty patch of East Nebraska prairie, patriotic roots run deep. Here in a one-room schoolhouse, for the first time, 14 children are talking about war.
Jeffrey says we're going to win. Jesse, what do you think about war? Do you worry about this war?
That none of those Iraqis, if they win, that they'll come and bomb the United States.
For many fourth-generation farm families, the bombs over Baghdad were dropped too soon.
My husband came home and he was crying, and we have a 18-year-old or 20-year-old son, and he cried.
Janet Pospisil's son, Mark, is an Army tank gunner in the Gulf.
Mark's little boy lives with us, and he was there, and I grabbed him, and I said, the war just started. And, of course, he just didn't really understand. An 8-year-old, a war starts, they think that they'll turn off the television in a few minutes, and it'll all be over with.
One of her neighbors, Brenda Bennett, felt lost and alone. Her 22-year-old son, Troy, is on an aircraft carrier.
I'm behind him 100%, but wondering how scared he is and wish I could be there just to hold him for a second, maybe.
While the battlefield is worlds away from Main Street, echoes of war are rattling little places like Friend, Nebraska, population 1,000, where everybody knows the 15 hometown boys helping fight the Desert Storm.
It's like a family because we are small and everyone knows everyone, and we kind of share our joys and sorrows, and we're kind of all in this together.
The first wave in Operation Desert Storm is being...
No one knows better than the Thompsons. At their meat locker, Carol and Richard stay glued to war news on the radio. They have 3 sons in the Gulf, Darren, Kenneth, and Rick.
You try to cope with a lot of things, but that is very hard. It sure puts a lump in your throat.
I raised these 3 boys. I want to see them through the end. I just hate to see them go over there and come back maimed or not make it back at all.
It's as if a part of a much bigger family has gone off to war. But like the Pledge of Allegiance, it comes with a territory where fighting for your country is as honorable as farming the land.
With liberty and justice for all.
With so many hometown boys in the Gulf, most people here never wanted war, but as they watch it from country cafes, from living rooms, and livestock auction houses, they have no choice but to support it and to fly the flag with all the zeal and spirit, one farmer said, of the 4th of July. Frank Courier, CBS News, Friend, Nebraska.
CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues. Bob Faw is covering domestic reaction, domestic response to what's going on. I was interested earlier, you said you thought the mood had changed some.
There's signs that it's starting to change because of the indignation, the outrage directed at the attacks on Tel Aviv. Mercifully, no one killed, injuries slight, damage relatively moderate. But there has been, just in the last couple of hours, if you judge by the public reaction in rallies, statements made by some leaders, a hardening of attitudes. How could this happen? And
but this was always predicted.
this was predicted by a bully boy who has a reputation for saying more than he can deliver, but in this case, delivering. And the delivery seems to have brought a toughening of attitudes.
The CBS News poll seems to reinforce what you're saying.
The poll does. There was a great ambivalence, and I think the Quinlan piece that I alluded to earlier spoke to this ambivalence. Yes, something has to be done. The polls are agreed to that. Here's the man who came in who took the money from the little boy so he couldn't have his lunch at school. You can't permit that. But do you sacrifice your loved one to accomplish that goal? And where people before were saying, no, you really don't, and had a terrible problem with that, now what you're starting to see is that this man has got to be stopped. At least that's what we're seeing in the last couple of hours. And the attack on Israel is what is coalescing.
I think, well, as you say, the fact that this is civilian involvement. Congressman Solars, I think, last weekend when the debate in Congress was going on, pounded his fist on the table and declared, there is evil. And you think a little, at the time, you think, well, maybe this is a little bit exaggerated. You seem to feel that this has absolutely confirmed it in people's minds.
Well, there's signs of it thus far. Now, one could also say there's another side to the coin here. There were no chemical or bacterial agents released on Israel. It could have been worse if this man were as heinous as we are led to believe by Solars. Now, why did he not use the ultimate weapon? At the same time, keeping in mind that hundreds or thousands of people in Baghdad were visited with the same kind of destruction, or worse. You don't hear the sense of outrage or the concern expressed for those people that you do for the several 100,000 presumably on the line in Tel Aviv. So there's a double standard of sorts here, and it's just too early, I guess, to tell where it sorts out. As the casualties go up, as the time drags out, as the cost to American taxpayers goes up and is known to go up, then it seems to me we really start to bite the bullet. Where does the support go then?
We may be coming into that phase now, Bob. You know, the initial successes were such that everybody seemed to be very happy about this and saying, well, great, we're really socking it to them. But the news that's going to unfold probably over the next several days won't be quite as one-sided, and all of the news certainly will not be good news. And this may also have some effect on it.
Plus, there will be the hard-headed realist who will say, wait a minute now, you've won militarily or you are about to win militarily, but look what you've got in the wake. You have a Middle East terribly unstable. You have the new power, the United States. But at the same time, you have a great void with Iraq flattened. You have Iran in the wings, which could step in. You have a regime in Syria, which is every bit as despicable as the regime in Iraq, and yet the United States is allied with that regime in Syria. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but these are the kind of questions that are going to come up down the road. Hard questions.
Do you think that the American public also may react somewhat differently should it become evident that there are civilian casualties on the other side?
Yeah. It seems to me that every night when we see pictures, not just of American casualties, but of children, we saw this happen in '82 in Lebanon. It radically changed the perception in this country of Israel when we saw those pictures of Lebanese orphans, oftentimes injured not by Israelis, but it didn't matter. It had a profound effect on the American public, and that's probably going to happen here.
I wonder to what extent the control of coverage is going to impact on that. I mean, do you suspect that the military is going to try to discourage us from showing pictures on television that are going to produce this effect at home?
Yeah, you've got to wonder, after what we've seen in the first 24 hours, where control is so tight, restrictions are so great, coverage is so limited, if that's a precursor of what's down the road, I mean, you're going to have a real problem here. Clearly the military in any war wants certain things shown and certain things not shown. It's unlikely that wouldn't happen here. And as the American public sees more of what this has done to people with whom we have no argument, namely the people of Iraq, not the government of Iraq, it could very well change opinions.
One of the things I think that we've learned from Vietnam is the fact that the public perception of what was going on is terribly important, and that, of course, has a lot to do with the nature of the coverage. Thank you very much, Bob. Bob Fall.
And CBS News coverage continues in just a moment.
This is CBS.
The holidays may be gone, but there's one package being held over just for you. The Money Store Prime Package with fixed-rate home equity loans as low as prime. We're extending our holiday offer for a limited time only to help homeowners pay off credit card bills, make home improvements, anything at all. Trust the Money Store to give homeowners a prime package when they need it most. Call right now, 1-800-LOAN-YES. Program may be canceled without notice.
Hi, folks. I'm Dan Walters at Rivergate Toyota in Madison, Middle Tennessee's #1 volume Toyota dealer. And here's how we're celebrating the new year. Right now, just $91 down delivers any car or truck in our giant inventory. As a matter of fact, you can buy a brand new 91 Camry, just like this one, $91 down, just $249 a month. So even if you live in Lebanon, Bowling Green, Gallatin, Murfreesboro, Dixon, make that short drive and we'll save you money. It's happening right now at Rivergate Toyota, 1520 North Gallatin Road in Madison. You come and see us.
You're watching CBS News continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here's Charles Osgood and Susan Spencer.
And here are the headlines in our continuing coverage. Allied armor heads toward Kuwait. The missile war comes to Israel. A second U.S. plane is reported downed, and Iraq is bombarded for a second straight night. In Saudi Arabia, CBS News correspondents report columns of Allied armor and supplies are heading north, massing along the Kuwait border. And this could be the signal that a ground assault against the Iraqi troops in Kuwait is at hand. Also in the Saudi Arabian area, an American Patriot missile did its job, shooting down an incoming Iraqi Scud missile before that missile could deliver its